Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Office Hours. Great to have you here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do on officehours.global. Our first hour is typically a general discussion of production-related questions. The second hour, typically, we do a deeper dive into a topic. And today we are going to be talking about three-point lighting. So for those of you who are interested in upping your lighting game, we're going to start with some basics, but we're also going to talk about some more advanced techniques and look at some examples of how you can make a person that you're shooting video of look better. So that's where we're headed. Let's dive into the regular questions. Mitch, who we got up first?
Thank you, Bill. Cherie Cheetah from Dallas, Texas. How many simultaneous streams can you do on a YouTube account?
And Alex is going to take us off on this one.
I don't know if there is a limit to how many simultaneous. If you're trying to do multiple streams, what I'm assuming is meant here is that you have multiple stream keys and you're streaming to multiple events on the same YouTube channel. Now there used to be able to stream to one stream key, and then you could attach that stream key to as many events as you'd like, and there's a variety of reasons we would do that, but that doesn't seem to be available anymore. But what you can do is if you have multiple different stream keys there, and the reason that this becomes important is if you're doing multiple languages. So the most that I know of that have been done is 18 different languages, 18 different streams, all to the same YouTube channel. So, but I don't know I don't think that there is a limit. There's no reason for them to put a limit on it. There may be a limit way out there, but definitely if you're doing under 10, it's not going to be a big deal. It's just a different event, different stream key. Just be careful of managing all those stream keys and naming them well. That's all I can say from personal experience.
Fair enough. Let's move on to the next question.
John Foltz from Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. I've got a computer running in a rack with operators about 15 feet away. What's the best way to get reliable USB signals for keyboard, mouse, and a decklink from the operators back to the rack?
And Tom Ferguson's going to handle this.
Well, 15 feet may be more than 15 feet for your cable run. I've successfully used this device, which is an optical USB-C cable, for doing longer runs. I've run this 33-foot cable just fine.
Okay, there's a solution for you. Alex Lindsay is going to pop in on it as well.
Yeah, for USB extensions, up to about 200 feet or 150 feet, we've used the Geffen has a USB extender. It's a USB it'll repower it and then put it over Ethernet, and we've used it a lot, and it works really well as far as extending USB over Ethernet, and that's worked well. The kind of the heavy hitter that we use for production is IHSE KVM. That is those are the ones that we use for like EVSs. So that's like over fiber. And what they do is they build boxes that you can have multiple inputs. You can have, I want this and this and this and this and this, and then puts it over fiber. And on the other side, you have another matching box, but it's all modular, and you can build it all out. So those are the kind of the much more expensive and very high end solution. But the Geffens for basic USB, the Geffens work well.
And Chris Fenwick just popped in on this one.
Yeah, along those lines, I just want to say I've used a USB to Ethernet. You power one end of it, and I'll find the link to it. I'll put it in the chat. But it was probably a 70-foot run, and did a live show through it. It was fine.
Nice. All right. Oh, and Sky.
It's kind of a question, because I used to use the everts and the very expensive solutions, but then I realized I've got this box that has all of those connections, that if I ran a single USB-C back to the CPU in the closet, all of my gazinzas are next to me here. I was just curious if something like the OWC tool would work.
Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it can work. It's just when you start talking about long runs, especially nowadays with the newer interfaces, when you're trying to do high speed, it just doesn't go very far with, effectively. So a lot of times we see kind of maximum lengths on a lot of these things because they're just not, the interface isn't built for the highest speed to do that.
Fair enough. That should pretty much cover it. Next question.
Bobby Rafferty from Central Florida. Did anyone watch the NVIDIA at SIGGRAPH keynote? Here is an impressive behind-the-scenes video. There's a link
Alex,
for
did you
it.
have time to watch that?
I did, because it was asked early. So a good reminder to people. I didn't watch the whole thing. I skipped through it. But it is a good reminder I do get up really early and I do look through these questions. And so I was able to kind of skip through this video. It looks really impressive. I think I'm probably go back and watch it. An old friend of mine, Richard Karras, is in the video. So it was fun to see Richard. So anyway, so I think it looks really interesting. They talk about how they created Jensen's, there's a toy Jensen, I guess is what they're calling it. It's like a little bobblehead version that they're doing. But they kind of go through the creation process. And I think that one of the things that's important as we look at that keynote is really thinking about really why I have Wednesdays be graphics, is that this is just part of what we're doing. A lot of this was video and a lot of it was there, but I think that we need to keep on, as producers, understanding how 3D works and understanding how we can add quality to what we're doing and start to understand at least what we're looking at there. And I think that's why we want to keep on talking about computer graphics as opposed to just video and audio and events. And so I think that it's definitely worth checking out. It's pretty cool setup, and it was pretty well put together. Yeah.
Did you see things in it that really impressed you, Alex? Specific technologies or something?
I mean, there was nothing there the fact that they're doing a lot of it in their own tools, I think, is really interesting. There's nothing in it that I saw that was like, oh, that's brand new. I haven't seen that before. But I think that, but it's the fact that it's becoming much closer to real time, much more. I mean, what they're really pushing is how do they get this into an engine that can make this happen? I mean, the toy Jensen, has, for instance, an audio driven facial animation. That's something that we've done for a while. So anyway, so those are a lot of the things, but they were really hard. And a lot of those things we've been doing for again 10 or 15 years. So it wasn't so much that these are new visual effects tricks. It's that they're being done in real time and they're being done, in a much easier interface and so on and so forth. So it's becoming more and more accessible, I guess, is what I would say.
And that's exciting. The fact that people who don't have these kind of huge crews and budgets will be able to play in this.
And I may skip into something and see something that was amazing, but what I saw was lots of really well. I mean, they have this thing where the servers are bouncing in and out, and while that's not particularly new or breaking ground, it looked really nice. It looked pretty. So
very cool. All right, next question.
John Foltz from Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. The Matterport Axis looks interesting. Is there a way to export files perhaps to USDZ?
And Alex is going to start us here.
I haven't tested that, but I do believe it exports OBJs, and OBJs can be easily converted to USDZ. So if you have an OBJ, there is it is object converter, reality converter. It's a developer tool for Apple. That will convert those OBJs to USDZ. I think you can also use things like Blender and Adobe Substance and Cinema 4D to do it as well.
And Nigel.
So I don't have an answer. I have an additional supplemental question because I've started looking at Matterport. Can I use a standard iPhone 13 to do this, or do I need to buy one of their fancy devices?
Alex, do you know it well enough to answer?
Well, you need a little turntable for it to do what it's doing. Because it's assuming when it does that turn. I mean, the worst part is I have it in a box over here. So I'm actually going to pull it out of the box over the weekend. So we'll play with it a little bit more. But it's assuming it's moving around its center. And so if you start wandering around with it, I don't know if it's not really built to stitch things together like Polycam. So I do think that you do need the little gizmo, which is $80 or whatever, to put it on. The app will work with that and then build the bits and pieces to it. I think that I've actually heard a lot of great reviews of it, and the guy likes it a lot. I'm going to finally get it out this weekend now that I got a little more air, and we'll do some mapping and see how it looks. But I think that it's pretty exciting if it works well. For a lot of things, if you're an event facility, if you're showing off work that you've done, if you're doing real estate, obviously that's their big market. If you're doing, but even things like schools or other, anything else that you want to be able to send a map to somebody on what to expect. It's pretty interesting.
Next question.
Nathan Chies in Singapore. If we can get the Insta360 link to work with a Raspberry Pi and output a clean HDMI and maintain some of the PTZ and picture controls, we might have an entry-level PTZ winner.
And David Paskin's going to start us here.
I said publicly last week that I was not going to buy this, that I was going to wait for Alex to take the hit. That lasted for all of 3 hours until I purchased it, and it's arriving today. Oh, I hate you. It's arriving today. So if I run out, that means FedEx has arrived. Here's without having played with it, here's my gut reaction. It looks great, but it doesn't have the zoom that an optical PTZ will have. It's got digital zoom, and it's very small and very limited. So,
fair enough, Alex.
Yeah, so here it is. This is the little guy. It's so much smaller than it looks on the website. Now I don't have it connected right now because long story. Anyway, so but it is probably at $300 at least the best webcam I've used. Now, will I ship it out to lots of people? I don't know yet because it does feel pretty delicate, and I have figured out I'm pretty good at crashing it. It turns out that it's got this great interface where you can see the video and you can kind of move it around. But all you do is tap on the screen and move, and you'll get to see it. And like it'll just pan and tilt based on your movement, like just clicking and dragging the scene in the video will just pan and tilt it, which is really cool. But if you pan and tilt it back and forth a lot really quickly, it crashes. so it just goes, it just sort of sinking to one side until it gets all the way to the bottom, and then it resets. So that's something that other PTZ cameras have trouble with if you send it too much information too quickly. So anyway, outside of that, I've never seen controls as good as the controls that are shipping with the software that comes with this. I think that the color rendition, the resolution, the quality, everything else is at least as good as the Brio, if not better. It's a good buy. I mean, so I don't think anybody, I think that it's a solid, and I don't expect to replace my 6K with it. People are asking, like, when are you going to come on the show with the 6K? Maybe not. Maybe I'll put it up there and we'll test it back and forth so you can see the difference between the two. But I do think that I think as a table camera, it's pretty awesome. Like what I did here is I have it attached to my, I'm testing the Elgato, the Elgato arm, just comparing it with because we're looking at buying a bunch of them, and I can't afford to buy many of the Ultimas that I have. So I'm testing the Elgato arm, and I just put the little camera on top of it. So now I can swing it out and then point it down and look at things on my desk if I want to show things off. And I've been kind of rigging up a weird camera for that in the past. And so I think that this is actually a pretty solid solution for that. So anyway, so I think that it's a great camera, and I think I'm going to end up using it a lot. It does get very hot, if it's left on. So if you leave it on, it's a sizzler. If I were them, I probably would have made it metal and finned, like just rough ridges, like we see with a lot of these like SSDs where you see there's a lot of ridging that goes on here. This is actually a heat sink, and so creating a lot of metal surface area probably would have been a better solution. Wouldn't be able to sell it for $300. I think that's probably the problem, but it doesn't seem to affect the operation except for the way that I crashed it. But outside of that, it's just a really good camera.
Until you mentioned the heat problem, I was thinking, gosh, they should put it in a polycarbonate snow globe kind of thing to protect it, but that's not going to work if it gets hot. David Paskin has another thought.
Just going back to the PTZ piece of it, one of the things that I'm excited about is the presets. So I'm planning on putting
so many
sort of back behind me, and then having a preset on my Stream Deck and a preset on my this and a preset. And what I don't know if it can do yet, maybe you know this, Alex, is can I control those presets? Can I switch to presets not from the app but from a Stream Deck or from Companion or with key commands or something like that?
I don't know about their API. I hope they put together a good API for it, because that'd be a really great option. Because having those hooks would make a huge difference for this camera. I think this is the kind of camera you want to hack. So I think that there's a real opportunity there. I will say that the transition, in my opinion, from one preset to another is not smooth. So it's not something I would probably do on air. Now, that's why I'm looking at like, it's great for an overhead camera, because I'll cut back to me, I'll reframe something, I'll grab onto it. If you do any, it seems to just want to cut, and it's not instant. You hit it and it takes a second for it to get there. It thinks about it and then it does it. And so there's a little bit of lag there. It's not quite a production camera. $300. We're doing pretty good. But it is a very, very solid, camera for like if you're an educator and you want, and then it has a lot of little features. Like I will say that the follow works really well. If you're just using it as a single camera and you want it to follow you around, it does. Its facial recognition and following is exceptional, better than Apple's in my opinion. And then in addition to that, it has these little stickers that you put on a whiteboard, and it will corner pin. It'll keystone the whiteboard so that it's nice and flat, that you can output it. So it's cool in that way. I mean, I find whiteboards on whiteboards in virtual events is a little skeuomorphic, but some people still need that. So,
Mitch Hill.
What about small rig, making a cage for it that has fins in it for heat sink? And
funny. That would be really funny. Really funny for small. I want to build one now just to mess with small rig. The problem with building small rigs for a lot of these is that you can't really go around it to PTZ. It needs to go everywhere, so that would be difficult. But a little one on the bottom, that would be kawaii. Yeah.
Wow. All right, next question.
Peter Rosado from Las Vegas, Nevada. Google Fiber is growing. There's a long link to it. My boss would like to create a LinkedIn video to garner Google's attention for Vegas. Creative ideas are welcome.
Alex.
From what I understand about Google Fiber, the real challenge for Google is it's all the infrastructure that's underground. So can they get access to, are they going to get the okay to do what they have to do from the municipality? Are they going to be able to get to the areas that they need to pull the fiber? And where it's really fallen down from what I read, where it's really fallen down is where they just can't get to the cables. They can't get they need a lot of things to make it work cost effectively for them. They're making this a very inexpensive service. So if anyone creates any hurdles for them that they're going to have to pay for on an ongoing basis, then they just walk away. So I think that the thing to do is to really research those things. And then the other thing to do is really outline those things. Like Las Vegas is ready to do whatever you need to do. And I think that you may have a hard time giving them that promise in Las Vegas, given the infrastructure that's there. so like giving Google what it needs in Las Vegas, given the infrastructure. I mean, it's hard in Las Vegas to get cell service. So because no one wants to put the cell towers on their big shiny buildings. And so I think that that's going to be the biggest challenge there. But those are the things you want to underline if you're making a video. And boy, I hope that I think that I'm excited that Google started slowing down their rollout. And I think that during COVID, they realized a lot of people really wanted it again. And so I think that it looks like they're accelerating again, which is a really great thing for all of us. But it does look like they're looking at Henderson, which is nearby. But I think that Vegas could be a heavy lift. But what you really have to do is communicate that you're ready to do whatever it takes to put them in there.
Right away, an easement, never an easy thing. Nigel has a thought.
Yeah, as a Google person who has 2.5 down and 1 up, I can tell you it's a great service. But I think what I was going to really follow on what Alex said, I think the issue is the other providers of internet in the area. So in Vegas in particular, and John knows this better than anyone, my advertising, my promotion would be, we're not AT&T. Because after 20-something years of going and visiting Vegas, I still can't make a call on an AT&T phone in most of the area. And it's just beyond me to some extent why this problem has been going for so long. And if you're at CES or one of those conferences, the phone is almost unusable because of the coverage.
And it's really a cell tower issue that the hotel, I mean, like you get really good cell service in Delhi. But if you're there's like a cell tower every four. I mean, everybody's like, sure, you can pay me a little bit and I'll put it on my roof. And so there is like a cell tower every 4 houses. It feels like. So the problem in Vegas is they have giant buildings and they don't want things on them, and then you don't get cell service.
Next question.
And it's from Chris Fenwick on our panel and in Emeryville, California. Fixing versus solving problems. We discussed this before we started the show today. Would the panel like to share examples of how this principle cropped up in their line of work?
And we're starting with Nigel.
So it crops up every day with me when I try and get my audio levels right. And because if I haven't set, the gain correctly, then I'm playing with the fader, not fixing the gain. I'm installing some new networking at home, and I'm having a problem with the router. So what I find I invariably do is I play for 13 hours with all the symptoms, then I finally unplug everything and go back to first principles and say, how should this work, and start again. And I normally have it done within an hour.
And Sky.
I think I look in the mirror and I recognize that as a human, I'm inherently lazy. And so I'm perfectly satisfied with the short term, but I'm realizing now that we really do need to think long game, not just short game in a thing. And my example was when we went into a house of worship situation and the engineer came and said, look, we have to get cameras in there. We have to do a right now solution, but we're going to build it in such a way that it's also for the right solution. And so we bought very economically the base equipment with the concept of it could be built out wider and broader in the future. So I think there's the yes and of you need to deal with the situation in the moment, but understand that you will need to also be trying to solve a problem in the future as well.
Alex.
Yeah, I find that the resistance to dealing with the actual problem, and really head on, gets really expensive over time, and it also undermines your ability to, like I have this water filter. I have a pool, and I have this. I don't know. It's like got a bunch of filters in it. Not four, but it's like the one inside of the other one. I don't know what it's called. Anyway, so I was very afraid of opening it. like it was like the pool people came over and did that, and it was like, it's got a bunch of dials. You got to pull all these things apart, and then you got to turn this on and turn this off and pull this over. And I finally watched, and it was months, and then my pool got worse, because I let go of the pool people, and I kept on trying to put more chemicals into it, and I kept on trying to make it all work, and I finally was like, I'm going to have to bite the bullet and open up this filter, and it was very scary. I opened it up and there was water everywhere, and I didn't do it right the first time. And I went back and watched more YouTube videos about, I did watch some music videos because you had to calm down for a minute. Then you watch. So anyway, then I figured out how to spray it, how to spray these things. Well, I got pretty good at it, and I had to work with this, and then I had to open it. I can now do it while I'm on a conference call. like literally, I can sit there, put you on mute, and I'll sit there and tear my whole thing apart and put it back together. And the thing is that it's so amazing. I find it so amazing that there's things that look very hard, and you just don't want to, you don't want to do them. And then when you get to the other side of learning how to do them, you're like, why would I ever? Like, why? You just look back and you're like, what was I thinking to not just figure this out, And I think that what we hope to do with labs and us talking here is figuring out how to, with the things that we have to get over. And I think that those are the things that, and I think that, it's really like what Nigel did was genius with his camera of just, correcting his camera every day and knowing how to do it every day, because those are the kind of things, if you can do something every day, that's what we do here. We do it over and over and over again, and we get better and better and better at it. But being willing to pull, the hard part is having the time and then being willing to pull that thread and just say, I'm going to rip this whole thing apart and put it back together. And it's a really powerful way to approach it. Just don't do it in the middle of a production.
Mitchell.
When I joined Office Hours a little over a year ago, I was a problem looking for a solution. Is that correct way to put it, or would it be more of a solution looking for a problem? Have they been fixed? I'm very confused.
Maybe Chris Fenwick can help you unconfuse yourself, deconfuse yourself.
So my best example, not best, a good example of fixing versus solving, and Ed, if you're listening, I'm not throwing you under the bus. I'm sitting on the bus with you in the same seat. I ran into a thing years ago with a client who had a presenter who was walking into her video productions with 4x3 slide decks. And in an edit, if you're dropping a 4x3 slide deck into a 16:9 video, you have problems. It's pillared. So the standard way that we solved it was we would put in a a white field, and then we'd put the thing, and then it was like a bunch more things in the timeline to edit. And I said, we could convert these decks. And there was pushback because they said, no, this system works. This fix works. I said, yeah, but why don't we solve it? You know what? Why don't we solve it? And so we came up with, and it wasn't a straightforward conversion, but we came up with a way of fixing the slide deck so that every edit for the rest of the video was done. And so putting an hour or whatever of time into converting and massaging the slide deck at the start of the day makes the rest of the day go super fast, as opposed to fiddling every single edit every time you have to drop in a thing. So I think that solving versus fixing is a super good principle. And like what Nigel said, go back to first principles. I like the phrasing of that.
And Hershey, do you want to get in on this? I saw your name come up and then go away and come up again.
Yes. And so here we go. It's the word accessibility, right? So a lot of people are getting sued for what we think is not following directions, but it's, again, not trying to solve the problem and trying to just fix it. And you find yourself with a lawsuit at the end of the day. It could be from website design work or what have you. But mainly, I look at it as if you do it right the first time, or do it, if you just pull the string and build it from the scratch, you get a better outcome because you finally look at each piece one by one. So when you do that, you start looking at the whole process a little bit more clearly, and you start to tune up maybe little processes that might have not been necessary. So I would always say that it's always a good start to look at what the problem is at first, understand the problem, but communicate enough with the client or whomever you're talking to, because you might not understand their needs. As we talked about, a couple examples today is setting up my camera, my microphone. Where do I sit? I have to place markers or stubs or something, bump dots, just so I know, okay, sit over here, place your head over here, okay, look forward. Last night, I asked my family member, I'm like, hey, okay, do you see me in camera if I lean to my right? Do you see me on the left? But I had to make sure that person understood, look at the monitor. Don't look at the light behind me. Don't look at the stuff around me. Look at the monitor, because that's the image you guys see. So it's to do it from the right, from the right way the first time. And fixing it, yeah, you'll patch things up, but how much can you patch? So the leaky pipe is still going to be a leaky pipe. It still has a hole in it. You just put, a solution on it. So, I know when I moved to this country, you've had to fix toilets, you've had to fix plumbing, you become one and all about all kinds of trades. So just remember that, do it the right way the first time and you won't have to fix it. Thank you.
Good perspective. Alex?
I learned how to program BASIC when I was 9 years old, and there was but we were taught by someone who worked. I can't remember the name of the company, but it was a really big software company, and they were one of the software developers, and they taught us in the basement of the church. There was like a bunch of little TRS-80s, and they taught us how to write it. And one of the things that I was taught that I still use is that just hack something out, just like for coding, hack an idea out, write it as fast as you can. See what works and doesn't work, and then throw all the code away. Like, just delete it. Like, now, write it the way you should have written it, now that you know what you know. And when you finish that, throw all the code away. Now draw out we used to draw the little charts, the little flow charts to figure out exactly what it needs to do, and then carefully build it. So the third one that we would build. And I did that with modeling when I was at ILM. I'd model something as fast, like I got a bunch of ideas and I'll just start modeling it. And I'd model it all out. Then I'd throw that model away. Then I'd do it again, much more carefully, throw that away. And then I would model it. And the funny thing is that I was surprised at how often that has been that kind of 3-step process. But, the key is throwing all of it away. It's like that. Like it's getting rid of all of it, not some of it. It's like keeping a little piece of your code is like in Pirates of the Caribbean where they keep the one coin. Like it's going to tie you back to all of those things and everything else. And you did a bunch of work on it, but it's always way faster when you redo it again. And I think that, and it's going to be more. And I think our industry, the industry that we've been in social media and everything else, there's been a whole culture of move fast and break things. And the real problem is that then when people say, hey, you can't do this anymore, you need to fix something on your platform, they can't. Like they can't fix it. And the reason that they can't fix it is because there's so much spaghetti code of moving fast and breaking things for a decade that you can't, like, you pull this pin and this 8 other things fall off. So, really clean code and really, when I say that clean code, clean ways of building things and putting things together that are flexible and robust makes a huge difference down the road.
I think this has been such a good discussion just in general that I've let it go over. Chris, I'm going to let you have a little bit of time here at the end before we move on. Thanks.
Alex, that's what happened between Premiere 4 and Premiere 5. They couldn't fix things. I will also say, just to wrap this all up, it doesn't help that people like us are total gearheads. And if you just give most of us the slightest excuse to go buy a thing or a box or a cable to fix something, we will. And so I think it's important. It's important for our pocketbooks and sanity and just the quality of what we do. Push through. You could probably solve almost everything with what you already own, or as we joke about, is within arm's length of where we're currently sitting.
Yeah. And I have one last little comment. It's just be careful about, though, diving too deep into things where the technical debt load is so big that you may learn a lot about something that is not going to help you at all in the future. I remember when I first started the very beginnings of networking, it was RS-232 stuff. And at some point that just disappeared. I moved on to Apple Talk and the same thing happened. I bought a bunch of Apple Talk stuff. I was useful for a while. Then one day I put it in a box and I never touched it again. So you can pick wrong and dive really deeply and learn great expertise at something that will not last. So just be a little wary of that. Tom Ferguson, you've been on so much of these. Let's do something real quick and then we'll move on.
All right, real quick. Keeping in today's theme, you can have the best camera, you can apply a LUT, you could do whatever you want, but start with the lighting and then move on through. You start at the beginning and that will help give you the solution to the problem.
Was that a little plug for the second hour today? Regardless,
maybe.
Thank you for that. All right, let's move on. We took a lot of time on that. It was a good subject. I enjoyed the talk. Go ahead, Mitch.
Nathan G. Sammy in Singapore asked, if I'm getting the Sony ZV E10, which one lens would be the optimal to get for streaming purposes?
We have a few opinions here. David Paskin starts us.
I'm a big fan of the Sigma 16mm 1.4. I use it on my Sony a6400, which is in many ways comparable to the E10, ZV E10. So,
okay, Harshik. Whoops, I think you're still muted.
Yeah, so I had asked this question the other day about the specific camera. I would like to know a little bit more information, if anything. What would you compare it to that any of the focus issues, or let's say we're talking about the cyber camera earlier, the 360 rather. What would you guys compare either of those two in with the lenses? Because I'm looking at the same camera.
Mitchell, you have a Sony, right?
Yeah, it's a good camera. It's the EV10. And what makes it better than the predecessor, the Z1, is it has a removable lens. So you're already, got some options there. In my case, my general purpose lens for this is a 17-35 Sony G lens, which is powered. I just find it very natural. But if you're going to have it locked down for streaming purposes only, let's say a website, you need a prime, maybe a 35 or 40 millimeter. That'll probably work well. Whether it's a Sigma or a Sony, it doesn't matter. Those are both good options. The advantage with the Sonys are the Sonys talk to the camera body. And if you need that, it's good for the metadata and post-production later on.
Fair enough. Next question.
Next question from James Fosline in Minneapolis, Minnesota. For setting up an Apple TV 4K, an AVR receiver, a 4K TV, and a Blu-ray player, would you route an HDMI from the Apple TV 4K to the monitor or to the receiver? Would the Toslink send Atmos audio to the receiver? The AVR is an Onkyo TX-NR696.
If only we had an expert. Oh, wait, Nigel.
Well, I'm not an expert on this particular receiver, but go back to first principles. What is your switching device? If you are going to switch between sources on the television, then you need to wire things into the television. Depending which one it is, that can be easy or hard. If you're going to use the AVR as your switching device, you need to wire things in there first. So first principles is what's your switching device? The second issue is going to be around what you use for your audio connections. I had a quick look at the back of that receiver online. I couldn't see an optical connection. Maybe I just missed it. Today, I think we would probably argue that an eARC is probably a better way that sends more signals than an optical one, but a lot will depend on the receiver. So first principles, what's your switching device? Start there.
Mitch Hill.
Yeah, I agree with Nigel. Also, make sure that the switching device or AVR is 2.x compatible, because you may end up with a world of trouble if you bought one cheap that was used and it doesn't do the handshaking. So make that the central part of your whole system. I've done it, works well, and most of them have inputs and outputs for Toslink, whether it's optical or digital.
Okay, next question.
Next question from Douglas Carmichael. When I tested a 14-inch MacBook Pro at the Apple Store, I was briefly able to comfortably use Logic Pro, even with the more space resolution setting enabled. Those of you with 14-inch MacBook Pros, have you felt discomfort working at more space for extended periods?
Alex.
Yeah, I don't have the eyes for that anymore. So I can't have a 14-inch and put it on more space and actually read what I'm working on. So I admit that I'm past the age that will allow that to happen, or at least the development of my eyes. So yeah, I can't do that. And for me, the 14-inch is less about the screen and more about the keyboard. Everything feels so cramped into that little keyboard that I have one and I use it. And I just haven't, because I just don't travel enough to, if I traveled a lot, I would move back to a 16-inch pretty quickly, because I find the 14-inch to be incredibly frustrating.
Chris Fenwick.
We call that mode the squinty mode.
Squinty mode, yeah, exactly.
I don't know how people do it. I can't do anything more than answer 1 or 2 emails on a laptop. I need 27 inches minimum. I just don't know how people do it.
Interesting. I'm a little bit in the opposite camp. Through using the regular tools of being able to enhance, blow up, and remove back, and I've gotten used to the keyboard commands, I can work as easily on smaller laptops as I can on bigger ones. Maybe that's because I spend most of the time when I'm doing that, not doing a bunch of things, but mainly editing in Final Cut, and it was designed to get rid of windows that aren't necessary and bring the primary one you're working up bigger through its workspaces thing. But even if I'm writing and things like that, I can always just Command Shift and plus key a couple of times and get text bigger and things like that. So, but everybody's going to be different. And so the most important thing is to get your computer working in a way that makes sense for you. Let's move on. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. Besides Adobe Character Animator, what tools would you recommend for real-time animated or virtual characters for a live stream? We want to try to do a custom character for the library's read-along program.
Alex starts us off.
I think it really depends on whether you want 2D or 3D. In the 3D world, Unity and Unreal Engine both have, a variety of tools that are, and iClone is the other one. So those 3 companies for 3D, or a 3D that looks like 2D, if you set the rendering correctly, those are the ones that a lot of us are using, and they'll have a lot of real-time inputs, and then it just depends on how you want to drive it. I think that the character animator in Adobe from a 2D perspective, essentially for post still, is pretty good. I don't know if it'll do like a real, maybe it does, maybe it's evolved, but I don't think it'll do like real time, like you can have someone in the back talking to people in real time and having it work. You could do that. We have done that actually with Unreal. and Unity. We actually have created characters in Unity where you can pick up your phone, look at the live feed from Unity, and when the person in the mocap suit is moving around, you just see them moving around, sitting, on your desk, via AR. So that kind of stuff is all doable in both Unreal and Unity and potentially iClone. But the 2D version, I don't know about other ones that do it.
Sky?
I was waiting for Chris Fenwick because I know he has a tool that he can animate a facial character. No, he says no. Well, then maybe my solution of a thing called Loomy, Loomie Live, is something that I thought you were talking about. It's creating a meta character. They also have a library of creatures and characters of like dragons and things like that. But maybe that's not what you're asking for. It's not nearly as sophisticated as the Adobe character animator and or the ability to manipulate all of the characters in the Adobe tool. But it could be fun.
You have invoked the name of Chris Fenwick, and Chris will appear now.
Chris, it sounds like a really heavy lift and a lot of extra work. And I think what Sky was alluding to is if it's something to just, capture kids' imagination and get them to pay attention a little better, could you possibly cut a million corners and just use a silly filter in Snap Camera? Just put somebody in a pirate mask to read a pirate story or something. I think that's what Sky was referring to.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael is in, and he weighs in with the question, the FCC created the Affordable Connectivity Program. There's a link to help low-income U.S. consumers connect to the internet. Would ultra-fast infrastructure, 1 gigabit symmetrical per user, be a true game changer for vulnerable populations?
And Alex going first.
Can be a game changer for everybody. but I think we need to stop talking about the bandwidth and really talk about how it's going to get to the house. We should really be talking about fiber to the house and here's why, is that we could just solve this once for a long time. Fiber to the house means it's 1 gig today, 5 gigs tomorrow, 10 gigs the next day, 40 gigs in 10 years. Whatever we need is done. The thing is that the telecommunications industry wants to nickel and dime us forever to get to those numbers, and they want to just try to make sure that they just edge us out and they keep on, profiting off of our hardship. And we should really take it personally at this point. They are, the fact that we're even talking about like, oh, let's break up the App Store, let's do these other things, that is such a tiny problem compared to the fact that the telecommunications industry is just ruinously attacking us. We just need to understand like how much we're getting, taken. I can't say the words on the show of how I feel about that. So, but they just, the more I know about it, about how ISPs work and little ISPs that can't get off the ground because they can't get pole access, the fact that we're, somehow we thought that 25 down and 3 up was broadband, all of this stuff comes out of people who are just piling huge amounts of money into Congress people's pockets, or into their campaign things to make sure that they, don't change any rules, and because they're just making money hand over fist on us, and it's not just, if that was all it was, if all they were doing is heavily profiting on us, it would be okay. Because a lot of people do that. You go to the Gap, So anyway, but the problem is that it's depressing huge parts of our country. So the thing is that, you look at Google Fiber starting to roll out and everything else, that's going to change a lot of those things. But a lot of broadband, if you put fiber into if we decided that fiber was going to be treated like your plumbing, like your power, like your telephone, like all these other things that we figured out how to do long ago. The reason we don't do that is not because we can't, because we did it with a lot less technology before. We know how to do this. If we just decided we're going to give everybody glass to the house, we could do it probably in 5 years. It would be one of these big things. We'd get people, a lot of jobs and all kinds of other things rolling fiber out. But in 5 to 10 years, we could have every person on fiber. The reason that happens is not because we can't, because it turns out we can print a lot of money that if we need it, if we just I'll just spend $1 trillion on this. Anyway, but that would change everything about our country, because suddenly all these people stuck in urban areas would go out to rural areas, and everybody, and it would just allow everybody to be, especially now in the work for home, it would allow everybody to go through there. People would have different access to education. It would be the biggest boom, for the country that we could give it. It's the number one thing that we could spend money on that would actually make a fundamental difference. So you're right. It would make a difference for people who have limited access, but it would make a difference for everyone, and that's something we have to really think hard about.
Chris, then Mitch, real quick.
As I get older, the more I realize that when the U.S. government names a program or a thing, it's going to be the exact opposite of what they said. So affordable connectivity will be insanely expensive, and it won't connect anybody. And so I agree with Alex that the problem is political, it's not technological. And getting the government involved in it is the worst thing that we can do. I think if the government got out of the way, the only thing I'll say to that is that we need to start thinking about glass to the house as a utility. It's not the government doing it, but the regulations need to be there. I mean, that's the problem right now that we have is that we need to be able to say, okay, we're not going to just allow the private entities have failed. And it's the only time that I think that we do that is when we say the private entities, the private system that we've created has failed, and it's now causing so much damage that we need to step in. It's now an acute problem.
Mitch Hill.
Yeah, we've come a long way from a chicken in every pot, which used to be the promise of our political overseers. But I think that what's happened is that internet has gone from something that was optional and a luxury to something that's a basic necessity of human life. Yeah. And as Alex and Chris both said, everybody needs to have it. I don't care how they do it. They just have to have it. So a chicken or an internet in every pot would be good.
And let's move on. Next question.
Robin Cutshaw from Atlanta, Georgia. As suggested by the Office Hours panel, I purchased a monoprice 8x8 HDMI matrix switch, and it's worked well. I need more ports and have looked at the lightware and wolfpack switches. Has anyone used these or have a better suggestion?
Alex.
I have looked at the wolfpack ones. I'm very close. It's 8x8 is great. The Blackbird has worked well, but I need more. And I haven't haven't pulled the trigger on any of them yet. They start getting pretty expensive when you start putting in a lot more HDMIs. And so I'm still trying to figure that out. But all I raise my hand to do is commiserate with you and say that I feel your pain. We need more matrices, and we don't have them.
And next question.
Paul Wallace from Austin, Texas. What's the most efficient way to back up a Centos LAMP server to a Synology NAS?
And you may have stumped us this time. Nobody raised their hand on this one, which causes me to think that we maybe don't have anybody with that specific set of expertise on the panel today, which means when this happens, and it occasionally happens, we don't get everything right off the top. The best thing to do is remember your question, pull it back, and try a different panel on a different day. You may find somebody, I wonder what panel it would be. Just maybe also try after hours and see if any of the technical geniuses who hang out there might have a solution for you. Let's move on to the next question.
Harshid Trivedi, Harshid, from Daytona Beach, Florida, he asked the question, what boom arms is everyone looking at these days? Alex and I looked through OCWhite, but the Elgato was underslung in comparison to the cheaper offering from OCWhite.
And we have a lot of people weighing in on that, and we're not too bad. We got a little more than 10 minutes to get to the top of the hour and 5 questions to go. So let's start with Alex and then move on.
I mean, clearly for the money, I vastly prefer the OCWhite. The fit and finish, the flexibility, and the amount of adjustability on the mic arm is much higher than the Elgato. So they're not the same arms. I think when people started first getting these underslung arms, they were like, oh, they're just the same, and they're not. Like, it's definitely the OCWhite is definitely 2 or 3 times better than the Elgato. That said, I'm not buying more OCWhites right now for other things that we're doing. I'm going to be investing more in the Elgatos. And the reason for that is that they do it well enough. And while if I'm going to use it all day, every day, I want the OCWhite. if I'm going to be sending it out or, doing other things, I'm going to choose the Elgato. The Elgato does enough of it to make it work. And so it's a good solid arm. It doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart. I think that it won't last as long as the OCWhite because of the way the spring, it doesn't have a spring system. It's using a friction. And friction usually means that eventually it will die. But that's okay. So I think that, but I think if I was going to, what I will say is that I'm a strong proponent of underslung arms. I think that the arms that go up and over, some of the less expensive OCWhites do that. They just get in your way. They get between everything else you're doing, your other monitors, all the other things that you're doing. So you really want to prioritize an underslung arm. And right now, I think the two leaders are the OCWhite for any price and the Elgato for the underslung arm for a more cost effective. I don't think there's anything under $100 that is worth putting on your desk, in my opinion.
David Paskin.
I've got the Elgato underslung, and it's been attached to my desk for a year and a half for whenever it came out, and I haven't had any problems with it.
That's good.
Fair enough. Nigel.
Yeah, same Elgato, the LP, which I'm getting low profile. My only thing to add in support of what Alex said is I don't move it very much. It goes one way and then back again. I think if I was looking for something I was going to use a lot more and move a lot more, I would go for something with a pneumatic or something better system.
Sky.
And that's 3 votes for Elgato. No, exactly the point of solving a problem. This arm is very flexible. I don't need to swing it as much as Alex does. He has a different use case, and he also has more budget. So consequently, I am very happy with my Elgato, with my MV7, and that means we have 4 people voting for Elgato. I don't know what that means.
Yeah. There you go. Keenan, next question, please.
Keenan Campbell from Nevada. With the introduction of the MacBook Pro M2, what dock does the panel like to eliminate the cable clutter? Does M2 share the same limitations with M1?
And Nigel's going to hop in on this.
I like the OWC stuff. I tend to use that for almost everything. I find it the strongest. I have to tell you, I'd really, really like a new Mini to solve this problem for me, because I find my issue is a shortage of USB-C or Thunderbird ports.
Yeah, I think in all the discussions that we've ever had about port extenders and things like that, OWC always comes out. Always is in the conversation, and usually comes out on top in terms of what people like and work with. We have heard other names. I'm not saying OCWhite is not OCWhite, but OWC is the only solution to this. But over the course of office hours over the last 2 years, they seem to have risen to the top as one of the most dependable solutions. So for whatever that's worth. Next question.
Next question from James Babbitt in San Diego. Which Mac screen recorder, other than the QuickTime Player, works with programs such as Zoom?
No one has been in there yet, but ScreenFlow is also a highly sought after screen recorder for Mac. It is more complex and it gives you more capabilities. Specifically, it has actually basic editing capabilities underneath it. So you can do a ScreenFlow recording, grab either windows or your entire screen, and then it's going to immediately put it into something where you can do tops and tails and even actual more significant editing. You can also do simple overlays, so multiple scenes rather than just one video. So it has some good basic solid editing. That's another really often, and Chris Fenwick has some thoughts here too.
Yeah, I sorry, Bill. I don't know if you mentioned it. It also records your camera. It'll record a camera source as well.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to do hey, this is me, let me show you my screen thing, and then you can scale the camera as one of the things. I've been using ScreenFlow since the day it was released publicly, and there's actually a feature in there that should have my name. And if you're interested, reach out. I'll explain it to you. It's a good feature.
Everybody I know who does tutorials, I mean, literally that produces tutorials for YouTube and other kinds of social media sites, it is a standalone program that will do almost all of it for you right inside that. John Preto, you had some thoughts?
I love ScreenFlow, but for capturing Zoom, I use OBS because I can capture just the window and then save that.
Okay, makes sense. So there's some alternatives for you. Let's move on to the next question.
I'm in with a question. Recently needed to paint an object a deep, flat black color for use on video. Is BLK 3.0 the deepest of the deep?
Ooh, I don't know if Alex is going to mention Vanta Black. If you want to spend,
other than Vanta Black is the deepest black, but it is so pricey. So
Yes.
like it's at a different level. I mean, you may have to take out a mortgage to put it on something. So
it's the anechoic chamber of your eyes.
It's really black. But outside of that, everything that we've used for black has been black 3.0. I mean, that is the one that we've used the most. I don't know if other ones exist. I just know that every set person that I ask that I say I need this to be as black as it can go brings the same spray paint. so that's what I would say.
Mitchell has a thought.
No, he just answered it because I was going to say I remember Alex mentioning something way back when in the archives and Vanta Black. I'll start saving my shekels for that.
Yeah, you don't. As a backdrop, that would
not throw some money into Bitcoin and hope it goes the right direction. Like you're going to need. It's like
I'd use a time machine to go back in time to invest in Bitcoin. If you,
I would like to make this cup Vanta Black, and it'll be like that'll be $10,000. So it's expensive. I don't know if it's that much, but it's really expensive. But it is impressive. I've been able to see a panel, like a little panel with Vanta Black on it, and it's like a hole in reality. Like it really is. Like you look at it and it doesn't make any sense. You move it and it's like this weird. It feels like a portal because it's not reflecting any black. The only time I had the sensory, the feeling of that black has been when I looked at an eclipse. They said there was like a hole in the sky and there was so much bright around it. But it's just a very fascinating substance, but very expensive right now. Of course, we'll be using it for cars, in the next 10 years.
And Mitch, of course, you'll be here for the second hour. And actually, one of the things I'm talking about in the very early parts of just some examples I'll be showing is maintaining black in a lit scene. And there's an example of that. So stick around for the second hour and we'll be talking about that topic. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael in with a question. What is the most effective way to output a binary stream from the TCP In Watcher binary actor in Isadora and push the output to a JavaScript actor to interpret?
This may be the second question that is of a specific nature that there's not someone here. Oh, Alex is going to weigh in on it. There you go.
I'm going to use this as an opportunity to let people know that it's my fault. Elle told me a couple days ago that he couldn't do Thursday this week. So we're not having the Isadora Labs this week. There was a conflict, and Elle told me a couple days ago, and I didn't get the email updated. So I'll let people know again on Thursday. But typically on Thursdays at 9. Next Thursday, Elle will be back. And on Thursdays at 9, you can either ask in our Discord, and Elle oftentimes responds to those. But otherwise, I would probably aim those Isadora questions at the after hours. We don't have a ton of Isadora experts in the group here on a daily basis. So it's difficult for us to answer those deeper questions without that.
Fair enough. Douglas, next question.
James Babbitt, San Diego. What is the minimum amount of RAM that the panelist would recommend when buying a new 16-inch M1 MacBook Pro?
Alex is going to weigh in.
I would say a bare minimum is 16 gigs is the bare minimum to buy because it's just really hard to do anything else with it. I have bought a lot of Mac Minis with 8 gigs because I knew exactly what I was going to use them for, and they've worked fine for that. But I would not buy another machine to do as a general purpose machine with less than 16 gigs. And then the real answer is as many gigs as you can afford. But the first thing that I would spend money on is, again, the hard drives. And I don't know how fast the hard drives are on the laptops. I can tell you in the Mac on the Studio, I would spend more money on hard drives over RAM just because the hard drive is so fast. So I would spend everything. I mean, I made the mistake of making mine small and pay for it every day. So it's for the Studio at least, I would put an 8 terabytes of hard drive space because it's 5 gigs a second, which you can't get on an external drive. I mean, you can. There's one that does it, but it takes up all your Thunderbolts on the back to get it there. So it's really expensive. So it's really worth it.
In my experience, Macs 2 and the pricing, 16 or 32 was usually pretty affordable. It was only when you got up into the multiples, 64 and now 128 and beyond, that the price really bounces up a ton. So somewhere in that 16 to 32 seems to always be kind of the best price point in Mac memory. Let's go on to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael, Guy mentioned the UPerfect 17-inch portable monitor. There's a long link to it. Can you fit a 14-inch or 16-inch MacBook Pro and the 17-inch UPerfect in a backpack?
Alex, then David. Alex, go ahead.
It just depends on how big your backpack is. I mean, you can fit an iMac into a backpack if you buy the right backpack.
Do you have a TARDIS backpack?
Exactly. Bag of holding.
David Baskin.
No, Alex stole my answer. It depends on the backpack. I do have a backpack where it's not a 17-inch portable monitor. It's a 14 or 15-inch, and I have that in the back pocket, and my laptop in the front pocket, and it works fine.
If you have a giant aluminum frame around your backpack, the answer is yes. So, anyway, we've managed to make it to the top of the hour. Thank you all for your questions, and thank the panel for all these fabulous answers. We're going to move on to our second hour now. And today we are going to be talking about one aspect of lighting, particularly lighting for video. And I have prepared some examples. I've got a bunch of things so that we can hopefully look at the effect of different kinds of lighting on scenes. These are traditions that have been around the video industry for a long time. And I'm going to try to do just a short, maybe 2 minutes of just setup of this, and then go back to question and answer. Then I have another little piece to do, and then some more question and answer. And hopefully that'll keep us from having to look through tons of stuff for too long. The first slide I'm going to show you here, I actually dove back into my on-set photos, and I found two from so far back that they embarrassed me and made me feel horrible. So I thought I would start by showing you that. This is one of my on-set pictures from probably the late 1980s, early 1990s. And I look back at that and I go, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Look at the fabulous monitors. But this is a basic 3-point light setting. And I've been doing that since the early days of my career. We have a key light on the right, a fill light using a bounce card for that, and a backlight. And those are the three aspects of it. This is the kind of thing that I typically do today, but it's still the same 3 points. We have a key light that wide panel on the left side of the shot. There's a rim light or a hair light behind there. The fill light is over on the side. You can't see it in that things. But why do people talk about this 3-point lighting? And very quickly, it's because of Rembrandt. We often call this Rembrandt lighting, and we're going back to the painters who understood how to make 3 dimensions pop up off of a canvas. And there are a couple of things I want you to specifically look at real quickly in this, and that's the shadow next to his self-portrait's nose. And he did the same thing here on another one of his formal paintings. That shadow is exactly what defines depth for you in 2 dimensions. Without that shadow, without the shadows, you can't see anything more than a single dimension. And so lighting guides, and this is one I would highly recommend you go on. I picked this off of the Cool Guides section of Reddit. It's from Digital's Camera. And I'm just going to look at a few of these in the first row here. And they're talking about different kinds of Rembrandt lighting here, but that's a whole source for a bunch of different kinds. We're going to look at Rembrandt with a softbox. And here's what I want you to look at. First and foremost, look at the shadows and how they're cast on a face. This is a single light. And if you don't get your key light set correctly, it's really hard to do your fill and rim light and have them do the right things. You must light your subject first. And what we are looking at on this, first of all, is the shadow area. If you read shadows, in fact, one of my best lighting instructors said, placing shadows is really what you're doing as much as you're throwing light on things. If you don't understand where your shadows are being placed, you can't see lighting. Also highlights, and this is, we're doing it Rembrandt with a softbox. We got a nice wrap around her face, but I want you to pay attention to that little tiny triangle of light under the model's eye. That triangle right there. Rembrandt lighting, 3-point lighting, the basis of it has to do with how you cast shadows and how you do light. And the quality of light is going to be determined by your light modifiers. So that versus this, that was a softbox. And I don't know if I pounced back and forth between these two. You can see that her, whoops, wrong way. Sorry about that. You can see that the, oh, that's one too far. I moved too far ahead on that. Let me go back a couple of scenes here. There you go. So that triangle of light under her eye is the key to 3-point lighting, or the key to the key light. This is what's called Rembrandt short side lighting. And basically the short side is a side away from the camera, but we're still seeing the triangle. In all of the pictures you've just seen, that triangle stays in position. If you light from the other side, if we move our light from the left to the right, you get broad lighting. And so you're thinking, okay, so that's covered the Rembrandt triangle, but it really hasn't. We've just moved the Rembrandt triangle to the other side of the model. And that is how you understand how these things work. Broad lighting, short lighting, and these things. Now we're going to go into 3-point lighting really quickly. The first two things is you're adding a fill light to the key light. The key light was one side. We had a side in shadow, but adding that second light adds a lot of fill to the face. And why is this important for video? In stills, you can do a lot of dramatic lighting because you're trying to get one frame. In video, the person is going to be moving, and maybe the whole set is going to be moving. The camera is going to be moving. So if you rely on the kind of light you do for photography, this kind of 3-point, get it right lighting, as the person moves, the lighting changes and it becomes impossible. So we want a lighting type for video that allows the person to move in the frame. And that's where you start adding these additional lights so that no matter which direction she moves, we can see all of her expressions and we can see her emote. And then the last piece of this, the hair light, I'm going to give you one more slide that shows you why hair lights can be so important. Right now on the right side of her face, as you look at it, her hair and the background are almost identical. It would be really hard to pull a key from her, to pull her face out of this, because those tonalities on the right side of her are almost identical. Look what happens when you add a fill light to this same shot. Suddenly the shape of her head is totally defined against the background. And that's what you're trying to do with 3-point lighting. You're trying to make somebody pop in such a way that no matter how they move in your frame, they are always well lit, they always have dimension to their face, and they always help us understand what this is doing, what our lighting is doing. So that's all I wanted to go through for the first piece. So hopefully that'll give you an idea of being able to look at some lights. Now I want to dive into the questions. So Mitch, let's do that. And we'll come back with a few more examples later as to how this kind of lighting can be used in a practical sense.
Okay, Bill, good demo. First question from Dave in Vancouver, British Columbia. Still learning about lighting for video and amazed how differently the camera sees light than my eyes do. In audio, we use monitors to know what's true. What's the equivalent for video?
And the simple answer is scopes, but Alex will talk about it a little bit.
Scopes. so scopes are good. I mean, there's a couple things when you're trying to do this. When you're viewing, if you're really in a critical color space and you really have to get this right while you're shooting. Now, there's a couple things about shooting in general. It depends on whether it's live or whether it's for post. If you are shooting it for post, you want to get as much data from the camera as possible so that you can do as much correction later as possible. It gives you a much larger, so shooting in RAW, shooting with log, shooting with things that are going to give you a much wider range. Now, once you do that, you also want to think about, you're going to shoot with that range, but oftentimes you want to still look at it in Rec 709 or Rec 2020 so that you can pull it back in and see what is this really going to look like, or am I really in the space that I need to be in? So those are the things for you to think about there. Scopes are going to tell you, like, if you think that your blacks are off, or you think that something's off, or you think the skin tone's off, it lets you color correct that and just take a look at it and go, okay, well, that is a little bit one way or the other that I might want to make some adjustments for. But again, if you're shooting in log, some of that color doesn't matter as much because that's not what you're doing. You're not applying all those looks at that moment. So you have to kind of look through that. I mean, but it depends on if you're capturing with a LUT, and what I mean by that is you're going to convert that to you're capturing to the output of what you're going to use. You're just going to take that video and cut it later and make minor adjustments to the color. Then you really have to pay attention because your target is much smaller. I didn't really get this for a long time until I was working with film. DPs were very upset with video cameras. So when they started being asked to shoot with video cameras, whether it was F950s or DVX 100s or whatever it was that they were asked to shoot on, they would throw small tantrums and they would just say, well, you have so little there's so little room for error that we can't get what we want out of the shot. And I really didn't. I was like, well, they're just being lazy. They should just be able to, just step it up and figure this out. Us video folks figure this out all the time. The longer I've done this, the more I understood what they were talking about, which is that when you're in a physical shoot, you've got a lot of moving parts and you have to make decisions, and it's really expensive for you to be sitting there trying to fiddle with some little pink or some little whatever. You're better off just getting, you want to be able to keep turning those things over. And so having that wider range with tons of dynamic range, with tons of resolution, all those things mean that you can fix this in post. Now, if you're looking for something true, especially for live, then scopes and charts. And the charts will allow you to get to a point where you are getting something that is accurate. So the charts, like a Demont chart, a Chroma Demont chart is going to allow you to be perfectly accurate. But that may not be what you're trying to make it look like. So a lot of times you want to get something, and that's where you need a color accurate monitor. And then you also need a neutral space. So this is why a lot of video villages are a tent. They're not just sitting, they don't have monitors. Sometimes they have monitors just sitting out, but that's not a good idea. But they have a tent that you go into, and oftentimes you sit there for just a little while, let your eyes kind of sort themselves out. Then you look at the monitor, and then you make decisions about what that color is going to look like. And so now, once you pick the first camera, and this is what I want the first camera to look like, you go back to scopes and back to more qualitative control that you can match all the other cameras to that one. So, but you got to get one camera to look exactly the way you want it to. But you need a neutral space. You need a color accurate monitor. Those are all things that are super important. And again, a lot of times, if you're doing it for live, that becomes super important. If you're doing it for post, you'll have a little bit of room for error.
All those things Alex just said, and we often call them on sets confidence monitors. That's the one monitor that is calibrated and as close to the right shoot settings that you can get. But there is a place where you move away from the scopes and you just have to look at the scene and decide what you're going to get. And also, if you don't understand the physics and how light works in a circumstance, it's really hard to make decisions about whether you're getting what you want. And actually, we'll do Douglas's question next, but then I'm going to come to a set of examples where I had to shoot both stills and video in a space that was horrible. And I'll talk a little through the techniques I used to manage to pull it off, and I'll show you some of the examples of what I got out of it and why I thought it worked okay. But let's go on to the next question for right now.
Douglas Carmichael is here. When would you use a spectrometer like the Sekonic C800 as shown in Christian Jackson's video?
Alex?
Almost never.
Yep.
So
that was my answer too.
The thing is that there are times when you can kind of do that, but again, for people who have scopes, we kind of look at it as like when you had film and you had to guess and you had to figure things out and you had to measure things, and having this be one stop over or one stop down or one stop whatever, these made a lot of sense. And there are times when I own one, and there are times when I will pull it out if I'm doing a reconnaissance, a rec that I'm trying to figure something out. So in reconnaissance of just figuring out what color am I dealing with the house lights, and what color and what brightness am I getting from here or whatever. But during a shoot, once I'm set up and I have Video Village, I generally have scopes. And once I have scopes, I'm not interested in fact, I find that it's actually harder if I have a DP walking in with that little box, because it means they're going to argue with me. And I'm like, I'm looking at the output. like I don't care. I don't need to see your little box and what it says, because I can see all the data all at one time for the entire image, for the entire scene, all in one place. And I don't, anyway, so.
100% agree with all this. Location scouting. That's the one place that those kind of meters are tremendously useful, particularly if you walk into something and you go, oh my gosh, the light is so mixed in here. I've got sodium vapor over there and I've got fluorescence over here. And what the heck am I looking at? One of those scopes can be great in terms of understanding the color temperature and the skew from white of those light sources. But most of the time we don't use them. And I actually remember seeing a DP help me on set once, and he said, your scopes are a light emitter. They're the best one you will ever have. They are so far more precise. That and your confidence monitor and being able to look at the signal through your software will give you far more information than that little device will ever do it.
What's important is the scopes tell you what the camera is seeing. Not like a meter of what this thing saw, but it is like, this is how the camera is responding to your scene.
Yeah. And what you're trying to do is get a picture. If your monitoring is decent in the field, that is the picture the camera is creating. And you also understand that if you just have a little problem, as you learn to read monitors and understand lighting, you can see a monitor picture and going, 90% of this is good. I have one problem. Now, what is that problem? Well, the problem is there's too much key light. I can fix that in the field. If the problem is there's too much blue coming from one side and it's infecting this otherwise beautiful picture, I can close the window or flag it or do something to get rid of that light that I don't want in my scene. It's very hard to do those kind of things by reading something on a meter. You just have to see your picture at the end of the day and make your picture look great.
And the one thing I will say also is that, especially scopes that let you have a lot of control with false color and so on and so forth, there's a lot of things that you can do that we analyze that will flip a bunch of things up and down and say, just show me the blue, just show me this, just show me that. And when you start looking at those things, it becomes just so much easier to analyze than a spot meter.
Let's go to the next question.
Sky Gleason from Seattle, Washington. Eyes are the windows to the soul. How much do you need to make sure the eyes and mouth are seen?
Alex will start us off.
Yeah, it's super important. I mean, that's, and we talk a lot about this, is that, when you're trying to figure out focus, the only thing that matters is the eyes. Like you can, just unless you're purposefully getting them out of focus, it's funny, we were watching, my family right now is watching Alias. We tend to pick a show and then we watch every episode, just one every night, until we get to the other end. And there's a couple. There's evidently one place in Sydney's house or whatever that they must have been using the same focus puller because everybody's out of focus all the time. Like, it's just a funny thing. The rest of the show is fine, but in this one place where they shot it, they're all just a little soft, and so you really have to, focus becomes a really important piece of that puzzle. A lot of times then when we're lighting people for interviews, I mean, we really want to look at we're looking for that light in their eyes. And even we have DPs that will take a little pen light and just put it over the camera where it doesn't really add light to them, but it does get a light in their eyes. It just has a glint to their eye without actually adding anything to their face, which I thought was a really interesting hack. The best way to learn, if you see someone that's lit really well, the best thing to do is go, especially if you have a 4K, whatever of them, but either way, take their eye, scale it up, and it'll show you exactly what the lighting was for that person's face. You'll see like all the little lights and everything else, and you'll see, oh, they did a little underlight here. I see what they did there, and then but you can analyze interviews very quickly by just grabbing. They're not only the window to the soul; they're the window to the lighting rig.
Actually, we call them catch lights too when they're in a thing's eyes. And in fact, there's a famous story from Hollywood about Merle Oberon. They started calling those little eye lights Obies because she demanded to have her eyes pop up a little bit. So this goes way back. The point that I'm making is that this kind of understanding of how lighting affects the emotion, the mood, everything about the images you're creating is a big deal. Mitch, you had some thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with the specular. The specular in the eye just sort of makes it pop, makes them live. The other thing to watch out for in your key light, your main key light, is you have to have it slightly above. Otherwise, you get this if they're wearing glasses, which is not a good thing. You get that reflection. You want to avoid all of that.
Yeah, let me pop over to just a couple of things. I think this will generate even more questions, and I'm going to pop into an actual video demo if I can get this to run. This is, whoops, I'm not seeing it. What's happening here? Did I punch the wrong button? Yes, I did punch the wrong button. I'm sorry. This is one of the sets that we created for a corporate video shoot that we had to do both video and stills in the same area, and this should replay at the end of here. This is us in the middle of the setup, and I wanted to talk about what I did for both doing corporate stills and for doing corporate video. This is the still set that we're doing, and you can see we're using photo flashes and reflectors in this. Then each one of these employees, and I think we did like 60 over the course of 3 days, is going to come over and do video interviews. And my challenge here is that we wanted both the stills and the video interview to look pretty similar. We're using two different kinds of lighting. We're doing substantial flashes over here, and we're doing continuous lighting on the right, and trying to get them to match was a bit of a problem. So here's what the corporate headshots look like. And again, we just run through a whole bunch of people over the course of time. But then we wanted the interviews to have a similarity to them. So here's just some, I don't know if there's sound in here or not. Oh, I think the sound is coming out differently. But anyway, these are a little dim from what the actual things look like on the computer screen. But you're seeing we're trying to get the same kind of consistency. I want a high key white background that can be dropped out. And I want to do it both in video and in, and in stills. And that's a big challenge in a field circumstance. I've been solving that problem through video a lot longer than I've been solving it through stills. But in stills, that the fundamental issue is that getting enough light to entirely blow out a background is different than setting up a video scene for moodiness. And this is important for keying. We talk a lot about keying, and some people key over white, those famous Apple ads and things like that, where they shot practically in white and everybody wanted that. So they started trying to do green screen and key out white, and it was all sorts of problems to replace that. So being able to shoot with enough control over light values so that you can get what effectively appears to be a fully white scene with a well-exposed subject in there requires a lot of care. And so it requires being able to take the three lights in a lighting setup, get a key so that you're at the proper split between that and the background. And it's a background that you want to eventually get to 255, 255, 255. So it's pure white without any infection in it so that the whole thing keys out cleanly. Takes a lot of time, and you have to pay attention to lighting ratios. And you have to have tools where you can dial up or dial down the exposure properly. Also, as you do your key light correctly and then you add your fill, often that exposure split will change. And, you may have gotten it exactly right for the key light. You add a fill and you add the backlight and you're suddenly overexposed because each light you add into the mix adds overall illumination to things. So let's go back to questions now and see what we're going to run up against. And I'll do my last little set of demos a little later on. So next question, Mitch.
From Douglas Carmichael, when would you use a small lighting console like the ETC ColorSource range on a shoot or set?
And Alex is going to start us off.
It's pretty rare unless we're doing a lot of live cues. So if we need to do live cues during the event, that we might use those. I've thought about it, and one of the things we're thinking about for our future kits is sending out, a VPN setup where we have DMX going across, IP and being able to have like send a kit out that we can actually adjust everything interactively. And we think that would be really cool. And that might be where we use that because we don't have someone managing the lighting on the other side. But so that's the one place that we're looking at doing it. But for most shoots that we do, we don't use DMX. We think about it, but we go, oh, this would be a lot easier if I could just sit here and just noodle with it. But we just end up going and making adjustments because we're not really changing it for those specific interviews.
Sky Gleason.
I could imagine that in a small insert stage like Alex was talking about. And if there's something that you're just manufacturing and consistently, but you want to change and modify something quickly, my question would be if you're going to get flicker, because I know some of the LED lights, the less expensive ones, aren't as consistent in your color.
That's really just a function of the quality of the light that you're getting. So if you get like a Nan Light Mix 60 or something like that has DMX, you're not going to get flicker. If you're buying, $100 little LED lights, you're definitely going to get flicker because that's how they slow them down. But you just have to get a fixture, whether it's Aperture or Nan Light or Airy or whatever it's going to do what it needs to do properly, and that cycle is a proper cycle. So that shouldn't be a problem with professional DMX lights, but if you're buying ones off of Amazon that are, American DJ or something like that, you may see some flickering.
Often will. Yeah. Often will. And Alex is 100% right about that. The ones that do pulsing of the light to dim it, they turn it off and on very rapidly. If the speed of that rapid turn off and turn on to lower the intensity of the light is conflicting with your shutter speeds and the rest of that, you'll get all sorts of horrible flickering, and it's a bad thing. The other thing I wanted to mention is in terms of lighting consoles and things like that is generally we're shooting in a video scene. There's two kinds. The kind that I was showing you, we have somebody in a fixed position. So if you're doing an interview and the person is just there, you light it once, you get it right. We don't really have to have a lot of control over turning on and turning off and changing it over the course of an interview. This is a bit different than if you're shooting a narrative film or something like that, and the character is going to be moving through space. In those kind of circumstances, I have seen people use controllable lights to light up an area, have that person move into another area. They dim the first area and give you the lighting for the second stop in somebody's walk and talk kind of demo. So in those cases, being able to control your lights in each scene and bring them up and down might be more useful. But generically for an interview kind of thing, we just don't see it that much. Next question.
Sky Gleason from Seattle is in, lighting the subject versus foreground and background. Tips, tricks, problems.
And that's very much what I'm going to be talking about in the last little piece of this. We'll be talking about how to set up lights so that you have key lights, fill lights, and then specifically, I don't know if I ran through it back there. I'll go back to one of my earlier slides, show you how profound the difference can be in terms of having a particular kind of key light and what it does to the background. It makes a huge difference. In fact, can I slip back there real quick? Maybe I can, and I'll show it to you right now. What I want to do is get to two shots. Here we go. This is current slideshow. If I pop to here, what I want you to notice, nope, that's the second one. Okay, here's the first one. This is exactly the same shot, this one and the next one. The only difference is the modifier on the light. This has a shoot-through umbrella being shown as the light modifier, which means that it's going to diffuse and spread that light around. In the next picture, we're going to a honeycomb grid, which is the equivalent of a softbox with a grid. The grid controls the light spill, and watch what happens watch what happens to her, just if nothing else. Boom. That is exactly the same camera at exactly the same angle with exactly the same subject. And the difference between this as a result, the amount of light that's hitting the background from this single light setup, and this, which has an utterly different appearance in the background, has to do with the modifier on the light, keeping spill light away from the background. That is always how you do two things. It's how you put somebody in deep shadow for dramatic effect. It is also how you allow a colored light in the background to be colorful. Because if you've got your key light, theoretically a white light to make the subject that you're shooting look good, and it's spilling all over your background behind you, there is no way you're going to be able to do deep saturated color back there. The light from your subject is going to be infecting that. So we use grids and other tools to narrow the angle of the light coming toward the subject. That gives you complete control of the light in the background. And in the still shooting, you can't do that very much in the real world with continuous lights. That's one of the tools that strobe lights, like a 500 watt strobe, puts out such a lot of light that I can literally shoot scenes like this with a totally black background, this kind of thing, even if the room is lit up. How? By putting so much light on the side of the face that I want to have be the key lit side, and then lowering my iris or the sensitivity of the camera down so much that it reads what would be a bright room as pitch black. So these are control things that you can actually do. Let's go on to the next question.
Next question in from Sky Gleason again from Seattle. What modifiers are helpful on a shoot?
Well, we've been talking about some of them, and most lighting people carry a variety of things. I always want something that I can take the lights that I'm bringing and either diffuse or control them. Diffusion often has to do with gels, and it has to do with things that spread light out. We've talked a lot about how the light fixture, if it's bigger, how a light panel with long fluorescent tubes wraps around a face, or a big softbox. Even if the light is small to begin with, if you can project it onto the surface of a softbox, that softbox becomes the light emitter, and that light will be softer and will wrap around your subject. So I want diffusion. I want tools that let me spread light. I also want tools just like the grid that I just showed you on that last still photo that concentrate the beam of the light so that it's going just where I want it and no place else, so that I can let the rest of it fall off into darkness and shadows. So those are the two basic classifications, and I carry most. I do carry a thing with me called a jelly roll, and I've got over the course of the year probably 75 or 80 pieces of standard types of diffusion and color correction gels. Color correction gels help you manage mixed light circumstances. So if you have daylight and you're shooting with desk lamps and tungsten and the daylight is too blue, you use a gel type called CTO that takes that color temperature and moves it from daylight more toward tungsten so that you can balance out the light on a scene. In fact, most of the lights behind me, even in this thing, have gels on them. The light over, is it this side? Yeah, that projector, when I first looked at it, was way too blue. The light on it had too much daylight and not enough to fit into the scene and not look wrong to me. Somebody pointed it out when I turned my blue wash off. And so I had to use a piece of CTO on that light to bring it down into the right color temperature. Lighting people do this all the time. You're going to look at all the lights on that are falling on your scene. You're going to analyze them for the color, saying, does it fit with my scene? And if it's not, use a gel to change it. So those are gels, color temperature gels, color gels, and diffusion are the two big things that we tend to use. Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Brea, California. Narrative often mics with a handheld boom. Actors often move during a scene. How do you avoid seeing boom shadows on the actor or the background?
Alex.
Rehearsal. Like rehearsal. Like you obviously a good boom operator is looking at the lights. They're looking at where they are in relationship to those lights. They're paying attention to that. That's part of why you hire someone who's got a lot of experience, is that they know that they have to stay out of those things. And so they're going to figure out where they have to be. Then you start, when you do a walkthrough and you start doing the rehearsal and they start figuring it out, and you'll see a good boom operator like going where they think they're going to go for the scene, and they're looking down, they're looking at where their shadow is. Maybe they have to get on the other side. Maybe they have to be right behind the camera, and so that's why some of those long booms become really important, because they have to do something that's really uncomfortable and odd to get to a point. It's not just where they get a good audio, but also where they're going to stay out of the frame, which doesn't always happen, and then stay out of the shadows. And then the other thing that we do is roto. So there's definitely cleanup that we've had to do in the past, where we're either taking a boom mic out that snuck into the frame, or we're taking a shadow out or a reflection out of something that's there, and that just is somebody sitting there with the roto tools, depending on what that is, and painting that out. So we try to avoid that because it's expensive. so it's but a lot of you have to, when you think about, we'll just fix it in post, and we always treat that like a joke. But the reality is that you always take into account, how long will it take if I fix this problem and I stop 100 people for X amount of time? How much does that cost? Or do I have one person sitting in a room for a day or 2 days? Because remember, if there's 100 people on a set, or let's say 50 people on a set, every hour is 50 hours. I mean, so you go, well, if it's going to take an extra hour to fix this, I can have a person work on it for a week, like to fix some little thing, and it would still even out, and I would still be able to make because there's all other costs. There's like hotel costs and everything else if you don't make your mark. So when we say fix it in post, it's oftentimes, now sometimes producers get too wild with that. But there is a reason to fix things in post, in the sense that you have to calculate. I used to have a little thing at the bottom of my productions that had how much it was costing me per minute. How much is this production costing me per minute? Calculating everything I put into it, all the prep, all the stuff. Now I'm on set. Keep track of how much that is, because you would make decisions very quickly, like, that's going to take 30 minutes to fix. I'm just going to go pay for something to make that go away, because it's cost less to pay for that. We bought a lot of printers that way. I can try to figure out how to fix this printer, or I can just go buy another one at Best Buy. And oftentimes it was just cheaper to buy another one at Best Buy than have people fiddle with it. And so you make those decisions very quickly. And so sometimes you end up rotoing out the booms and stuff like that. But it's because it was just faster than reshooting it, or you get that perfect moment and the boom mic was in there, and you'll figure it out. So those are all things that you have to kind of roll with. But rehearsal is super, super important for a lot of those things. Now, a lot of times also for big shows in the United States, ADR. Like, if we don't think we're going to get it, that we're going to end up ADR in anyway. And an enormous amount of film, other than Steven Soderbergh, enormous number of films are mostly ADR.
And ADR is automated dialogue replacement, where actors come back in and literally talk over their performance in the field. Chris Fenwick has some thoughts.
Cat Stevens, I'm being followed by a boom shadow. I actually really enjoy watching the lighting guys and the audio guys argue and bicker on set. It's immensely entertaining to me because it's like they'll figure it out and then let them go. And I'll also say, Alex, your idea of, we can fix it in post, your cost per minute of production. That is why I'm in post-production, because you guys keep throwing stuff my way to fix.
Yeah. And I'm going to throw out one more term for you all, which is blocking. It comes from theater, and that's how the actors move on stage. It's now used in every part of the production industries. And blocking rehearsals do exactly this. That is walking through, usually at a slower pace, sometimes at their actual pace, and seeing where everything ends up physically in space for every shot that you're executing, so that everybody, all the crafts, can know what's going to happen. And that is absolutely critical for somebody in a moving scene who is going to be booming the talent. They've got to know exactly where to go so that they can minimize their impact on other crafts, in this case, cinematography. Next question.
And it's from Rodrigo Munez from Stockholm, Sweden. And the obvious question when talking about scopes is an okay monitor that does not break the bank.
Well, this is Mitchell. Mitchell's going to weigh in on this.
Sure. I mean, there's a ton of them. Usually they're 7 inches. Look for one that has decent brightness. For example, this is just a basic Andy Cine, and it's also made by Feelgood, by the way. It's the same monitor. It pushes well above 1,000 nits, but it's a monitor with the scopes built into it, and as you can see, it makes Alex look wonderful. So, like I said, there's a lot of them out there that have meters built in. There you go, Mr. Work it, baby.
And actually, more and more monitors are allowing these tools to be overlaid on top. I will say that if you really want to get serious about it, there's a company called Flanders Scientific that makes probably the premium on-set monitors. There are a couple other companies that compete with them, but if and for let's say a 19-inch monitor on set, you're talking $3,000 and above, and sometimes way more than that if you want the most precise color accuracy possible. So when you get into monitoring in mission-critical, big-budget things, it is taken very seriously, and directors of photography will only be comfortable working with a monitor that they understand deeply how it reproduces what they're going to see in post. Sky has a thought here.
Well, again, early days of the Red camera, the DP went and on the client monitor turned everything to black and white, because he knew at that point he just didn't want to have that conversation and argument with the talent, because they knew they'd be fixing it all in post, and he didn't have the time to try to help the client understand that. So he just gave him an image and said, "Yeah, we'll talk about that color concepts later."
Yeah, and it's interesting because we have kind of moved a little in the eras. Back in the early days, if you didn't have that conference monitor on set, you were generally working to broadcast standards. Those were technical standards that everybody understood in the broadcast business. But of course, nowadays we're producing as much for devices, handheld devices, and things like that. And so you're starting to see on set things like iPads and other tablets, phones, because they understand that the number of eyeballs that are going to be seeing that signal on those devices now far exceeds those that are going to be seeing it on televisions. And so they want to make sure that every color decision they're making, every brightness, luminance decision translates to what people are actually watching it on. Alex has a thought here.
Yeah, if I'm going to stream it, if I'm doing any test streams, my primary monitor is my iPhone. I turn all the color correction stuff off and I just look at it in the raw iPhone mode. And that is going to be accurate enough for streaming, given that everybody's monitor is slightly different. That is going to be, if it looks good in color on that phone, it's gonna look fine.
Yeah, I'm seeing that more and more too. In fact, I won't do any work without checking it on some kind of iDevice first, in part because Apple built into their process what's called managed color. So they have a system for ensuring that what's seen on one iPad or iPhone or something like that is exactly what will be seen, or as close as is humanly possible, manufacturing possible, to be the same thing seen on everything else. Let's move on to the next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. I noticed that some of my older LED lights seem to be more yellow than the new ones. Is this an aging issue or a shift in technology?
Alex.
Aging issue. Yeah, they actually will get a little yellow over time. Especially and I will say a shift in technology, the older ones definitely had that more. But I assume you've had these for a long time, because we saw that start to occur with some of our LEDs, but it was after, I don't know, 8 or 10 years.
Okay, I'm going to stop and do the last little module of this, because maybe it'll generate a few more questions for the last part of our time here today. So switching back over, let's go out on set and look at some things. We talked about 3-point lighting and key fill and rim light. And so this is one of our setups from probably 3 or 4 years ago. We had a lot of interesting issues on the set that we had to deal with, but let me put labels on here. So there's your key light. It's coming from the Windows side of the young lady who is our talent. There were windows on that side, so I decided rather than fighting the windows that I was going to have my key light work with them. There's a gentle fill light over there. It's just a small little kicker on the side of her face. And then the rim light is floating over the top of her, and that's what's providing that highlight in the center of her head. Also, just some interesting things about when you're setting up lighting, you're trying to control what's happening behind there. So there's a couple of light control things I'm using. I didn't like the background on the right side of her head, so I found that somewhere around the office building I was working at, that kind of gray panel on the left. On the right, more interestingly, those are glass windows, and you often find this in corporate production where you've got a window and, you know, the first time somebody walked by it, I said, that can't do. I'm not going to have somebody walking through my scene and distracting people. So that is a giant white pop-up, and I used to carry giant white and black. I used to carry 2 of them. It's white on one side and black on the other. And so I was able to put that in there. And then in the picture on the right, you're seeing of the final shot, it just gave me a nice kind of soft blue, and the white of the actual architecture behind her turned out to be the white. So I'm always looking at how can I build something that keeps the audience kind of focused on the person I'm lighting. Let's go to a different set and a different thing. I was shooting this, I guess about a year and a half ago, right in the beginning of the pandemic. We had to go do something about it was a realtor who sells really, really high-end stuff. And I wanted to specifically break down some of the lighting things in here because it shows you how you run into circumstances that you have to fix. The next part of this, put some labels out there. The key light is actually outside, and that gets us into I'm not going to talk about it at length, but motivated lighting. If you have light sources that you can't control, like large windows and things like that, you can set up a key light someplace else, but it's just as easy to set up a controllable light outside so that even if a cloud comes by or something, I'm not losing light through the window and delaying my production. So that light panel's Gemini that's outside shooting through the window is actually my key light on her. But in the specific kind of shot I'm trying to get, I want her arm to pop. She's talking about yoga and things like that because that's one of her passions. And so in this shot and the next shot you're going to see, let's move to the next shot, you see a light down there at the very bottom of the center of the scene, and that light is doing nothing but lighting her forearm. So why would I take all the time to set a specific light like that? I called it the arm definition light in here. And so let me play a little bit of the resulting piece of this so that you can kind of see, and I'll try to pause if I can. I may not be able to, so I'll go here, and I want you just to notice her forearm in the shots that go by here.
There are places where you find peace.
So that's kind of a wide, here's the shot. I was trying to light her arm for that shot, nothing else. And I also want you to look at this shot because this shot is going to be the next one we're going to look at. Here's the setup for that last shot you just saw in the spot. And I got lucky because we had some nice slashes of light coming in, but in this piece, and the upper right is the actual finished spot that we did. I understood that her dark hair was going to have little to no detail. Also, her dark suit was going to have little or no detail. And I don't know how well it's showing up on my monitor. Hopefully you can see it. But that light behind her, that Tota LED that I've just got literally turned up all the way, is there for no other reason to give her hair highlight and to give the right shoulder of her jacket highlight so that I could get some shape pulled out of that. And it ended up being a pretty successful look. Let's do some other, just really quickly, we've got about 3 more slides, and then we'll go back to questions and any questions you have about these. Here we are in a typical corporate office. This is the CEO of a credit union not too far from us, and we do a lot of work for them. So my key light is the Gemini behind the little partial scrim in the center left of the shot. Another light panel's Astra, using that as a rim light for her. Her fill light is over on the right side. We don't see it, but it really isn't important. We were doing actually wardrobe tests there, and we're trying to decide whether to use that outfit or the other one. And we actually ended up using the red one, and you'll see that in the next frame I'm going to show you. So this is how we lit her. Key light, when I looked at it in the monitor, and this is why monitoring well is so important, I realized that her forehead was just a little bit too hot. I didn't like the fact that my eyes were being drawn to the top of her face. So that scrim that's in front of the Gemini is pulling the light level down just a little bit on her face and giving her a more pleasing balance of top to bottom light. Here's a still of the shot that we ended up getting. So that's what the audience would see. And when you're lighting somebody, all of these light modifiers are going in to make somebody look the best they possibly can. That's all you're being paid to do here. So it's incredibly important that you pay attention to each little detail. And I've found that I spend more and more and more time as my career goes forward. I'll get everything set up. I'll get the tools that I need ready. But then the final lighting cannot be done by anything other than looking at the monitor and learning how to notice the problems. His or her forehead is too shiny. I just don't like the way the light is being reflected off of it. My job is to do something about that and make the person look the best they possibly can. So let's move on to the next question.
Henry Ramos from Yonkers, New York. Does anyone still make cookies out of black wrap anymore? Makes me feel pretty old school.
Absolutely. Sky, what do you think?
Absolutely. Because you want a little mottled texture back there. Maybe you can just punch some holes in that. Again, black wrap is basically blackened aluminum foil that you can do just anything magical, and with some gaff tape, get it to shape your light in a way that is very quick. And we were talking about problem solving and solutions versus fixes. It's a very quick fix. And could you do it in other ways? Absolutely. But maybe you don't have the time and you just want to grab that piece of black aluminum foil and shape some light and modify it a little bit.
Alex Lindsay.
And if you're really good at it, people might start calling you a cookie monster.
Ooh, ouch.
I mean, it was either that or
you went there.
It was either that or saying, just make sure not to forget the chocolate chips. So, yeah. So for people who are watching, the cookies are something that you do. You kind of get the black wrap up there, and as Sky was alluding to, as you use that black wrap, you might punch holes in it. You may wrap it around. You may form things with it, but it's just to get the light the way you want it. And I see it all the time.
Makes you very snooty. There you go.
And I think cookie is a shortened form of the term cucaloris, which is a hard metal thing with some sort of pattern on it. It's a kind of a pattern projector for hard lights. And so, but making your own is a time-honored tradition. In fact, in the second music video that we did here at Office Hours in Virtual Insanity, one of my challenges to myself is I wanted to do low key with most of the scene being black all the time and people popping out of it. Now, we were in the beginning of the pandemic when we shot that, so I literally had absolutely no control over any of my subjects. And it was fun going on Zoom and trying to direct people to shoot themselves on this. And one of the first questions I would ask them is, do you have any aluminum foil in your kitchen? And 80% of my subjects did have a roll of aluminum foil. And so I walk them through literally trying to use that as the light modifier to take whatever light they have in their office or in their desk and limit it from spill and limit it to the area that I wanted to light. And it was really fun. I mean, we had such a good time with all the musicians from the Office Hours band, just trying to figure out how to make them look, to light them, given no ability for a grip top or anything else. We're just going to make it up as we go along. And I was pretty happy with that aspect of the video, the fact that I was able to get black that looked black. Each individual face kind of rose from generic darkness, and aluminum foil had a lot to do with that. I will tell you that. Scott, you had some thoughts?
Over your shoulder, you have a very pointed light. So I was wondering if you used a scoop?
Slash?
Yeah, a slasher light. Or did you just barn door it in? But you could make the thing I was alluding to was the snoot to make a little pointed, funnel.
Yeah, that is a relatively hard light. If you were to point that at a wall, you would see a very crisp edge spot. So there's two modifiers on that light, one of which is a softening gel. It is a particular, I'm trying to remember the number of it from the Roscoe library.
Opal?
It might be Opal Frost. It's something very close to that. It's a heavy diffusion. So that's going to expand the light out. And that's why on the bottom of that light, you're not seeing a hard edge, you're seeing a soft edge. The other part is just its position, the geometry of the light. That small fixture is right up against the wall. Those are actual drapes. So the reason you're getting the tiered effect is that soft spot is hitting 3 different pleats of the fabric. And the pleats of the fabric, by the way, are up there for sound control in my office. That
and
heavy
you're not
fabrics.
Worried about burning the house down?
No, these are very low. These are all 12-volt fixtures. So there's nothing.
Remember the original low lights? They would get very high.
The Lowell Totas. If you grab one of those barn doors on them, you'd remember that for the rest of your life with a scar. Lighting can be, listen, the two things that we should say something about as you get into lighting, power distribution and handling heat. It is less a problem these days because LEDs don't put out the kind of heat that happened in the old days with tungsten. But it's still, you have to be careful, particularly if you're running AC around things. The best circumstances, you'll blow breakers in some corporate office and it'll shut down your shoot. And I'm saying that's the best circumstance because the worst is you'll overload a circuit and burn the entire place down, which is not a good idea. That's why gaffers and best boys and the electrical department is your best friend on an actual set because they will keep you from doing things that are dumb and can really cost you a lot of money. Mitchell has a question.
So we're talking about old school here. How about the C47? That generally saves your fingers.
Yeah, C47s. That's the internal and name for a standard wooden clothespin. And I've probably had 10 discussions over the course of my career about where did that name come from? And nobody has definitive. It's one of those just things that are lost in the midst of time. The best one I heard was that was the catalog number in New York City in some lighting catalog. So you ordered a bag of C47s and they'd show up. But I know. Chris is going, nah, that's not it. But nobody knows Chris? For sure.
It's because when lighting techs and grips used to put clothespins as a line item for expendables, the accountants wouldn't pay for it. So they made up a model number and no accountant would challenge them on a model number that they because it would admit that they didn't understand the industry. So they made it up.
That's the most common story I've heard was that they just
it's
made
the one
up
I'm
a
sticking
number.
with.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. We're down to the last couple of questions. In fact, if I cycle this through, this is the last one. So we'll either end a little bit early, or if anybody has an additional question or two to throw in there, we're getting kind of close. We're 9 minutes till the top of the hour. So, and we can go through and talk about, maybe ask a generic question and see what their most interesting lighting challenges have been. But let's move on to the next question and see where we are.
Henry Ramos from Yonkers, New York is back. What's your preferred background light for behind interviews? Sometimes like to vary the angle from the key light to add shadows and contrast or highlight an item of interest like a logo.
Let's start with Alex.
It depends. Generally, most of us will bring 3, 4, 5 lights that are just for the background, and we don't know exactly what we're going to do with them. And we're going to what we would call, negotiate with the space, with, figuring out where, what do we want to bring out? What do we want to put in shadow? What do we want to grab onto? So definitely having, generally for the background, we like things to be a little bit more directional. Sometimes they're general, like I'm just going to light it up, but oftentimes you want something that you have a little bit more control over so that you can really kind of highlight and because it's not just making the background look great. It's also, how does it look with the subject sitting in the seat? And one thing I will say for lighting that I do a lot is I have stand-ins. I hire stand-ins, and I get a lot of budget pushback on these. I'll have stand-ins. If I have 7 people in a panel, I'll have 7 stand-ins that are there, 4 hours before the event. And generally, I am asking for stand-ins that are the same gender, same genetic background, same everything of the people that I'm going to have there in the same order, because I really want to see how that works. We had I think I've talked about this in the past, Frederick Van Johnson, who is, does This Week in Photography. When we did events in the White House with President Obama, Frederick was what we called our faux POTUS, or the faux po. And Frederick, his only job was to just impersonate Obama, and he was exceptional at it. But he happened to have a very similar complexion and a similar height and a similar whatever. So literally, we would get passes to bring him into the White House to sit. His only job was to sit in that seat so that I could make sure that my all of my lighting and everything else was just perfect for the person that was going to come in. And so I highly recommend, with this, take this question a little longer because we had a little time, that you look at, really trying to make sure that you're really it's a dance between the subject and the background, have a stand-in, make sure that it really looks good, because when you get a VIP in there, you got a minute to figure this out. And so really working through that makes sense. The other thing that I will use this time for is to remind you that the interviews on Light and Magic on Disney Plus are probably the best composition and lighting I have ever seen. Like, it is, like, I am literally just going back and using, just staring at it, like just staring at the beauty of that these backgrounds are. I mean, the depth, but just the right amount, not too blurry, but blurry enough. Just the right lighting, they just got every detail. And these are people that I've seen in real life. They've never looked that good. They all are, they're all very handsome and beautiful, but man, they just crushed it, and so if you're talking about lighting and think that's a master's course and just breaking down, what they did for these interviews. And we might even turn that into a second hour of just like taking stills from that and talking about it, because just masterful work.
Sky Gleason.
I've fallen in love with these little extra lights. A DP early days would put 3 little, little white puck lights in the back of the client, because he wanted to make sure that it was his signature, because that way he would get paid if they reused it a second or third time. And so he always had these 3 little lights way in the back. But I just love the flexibility of these. And we use this on Matt in the kitchen because we wanted to throw a little pink shadow back in the back, because that was the brand color of our show.
This is a typical thing. In fact, I mentioned the story about Obies before, because so you've got key light. The key light is going to do the heavy lifting of lighting you're seeing. You just have to know where it's coming from. It might be a fixture, it might be the sun, it might be something else, but there's always going to be a primary light. Then if you don't want a really low key look where one half of your face is completely bright, and like in some of those early photos, the other half is fully in shadow, you have to add light in there. And so fill light of some form. It can be an active instrument, it can be a bounce card, a big white sheet, or in Hollywood they often use like these gigantic 12 by 12 panels that are pure white to bounce light into a scene. So that's why the theory of 3-point lighting, those 2 things, and then a backlight or rim light, if you need to separate somebody from a scene, have become the standard that you should at least understand, because understanding the role of those 3 in creating depth in a subject And then, when you get into your own lighting things, it's as little, if I wanted to change my lighting look, I just reach up and say, do I want more or less on the right side of my face? And all I'm doing is rotating a particular light in a different way and deciding how is that affecting what I'm doing? Do I want that light entirely off my face? And if so, am I happier with more shadow on that side? And all I'm doing is twisting a little tiny light panel and looking at the result of making that change. And then for those of you who are making images, all we're really asking is for you to take a moment after you have your camera set, after you have the basic lighting plot that you thought was going to work there, look at the monitor and decide, is there something you can do to improve it? Alex just inspired me to think back on a shot I had years ago. It was a woman who was, oh my God, this woman was a saint. She worked with really, really damaged people, and she did a great job. But she came to my set, and it was an outdoor set in the backyard, and she had a big blemish that, I could just tell she was really uncomfortable about that. And it was pretty close to the corner of her mouth. And I kept thinking, can I light her in a way that that's not as prominent? So I repositioned her, and I took a lot of time flagging the lights and everything. And I got to something I was pretty happy with. And I just remember when she saw her picture back, how good she felt, because I had taken something that she had been afraid about and worked really hard to make it not the central focus of what she would see on the screen. And that is at heart our job. That's what we're trying to do. Let's move on. Next question. We've got a couple more in here.
Roscoe Jones from Bray, California has a comment, and I think it's directed at you, Bill. Have you taught college classes in lighting? You are an awesome teacher.
Well, thank you. That's very sweet of you to say. No, I have not. I did write, I noted, I spent about 10 years writing for Video Maker, and I did write a couple of articles on lighting. I had to learn there. I also had people who were mentors along the way. I remember I was doing some stuff for the Bureau of Land Management, and they brought in a guy named Bill Hoshevnikov, who's one of the, he's a solid director of photography and wrote a lot about lighting. And one day watching him light accelerated my understanding of this from 0 to about 50% of the way that I needed to go. So sometimes the right mentor, the right person, the right experience can really take you a lot farther than you would have been. And once you understand how to look at these things, then you start seeing these little tiny, oh, I'm not getting that right. What is it wrong? Why is my key light in the wrong place to get that person looking better than they are right now? And you just struggle and suddenly you start learning those little rules. But thank you for the comment. I appreciate it. Let's go on to the next question.
Tom Ferguson from Phoenix, Arizona, and on the panel, what's your favorite on-the-road light?
There's so many possible. These days, and this is going to sound weird because I don't think the light was a huge success. We, in our early careers, used things called low total lights. In fact, I think Sky mentioned them before. It was a broad source. It had a long quartz tube in it and a couple of barn doors, and that's all it had. But for lighting up a huge area, I used them in warehouses and stuff like that. It pushed out tons of soft-ish light, as soft as you can get from a small fixture. And so I have found a lot of uses for them. A few years ago, they did a new version of it, the Toda LED, and they recreated that light with an LED. And I bought one just kind of as, this is going to take me back to my early days. I can't tell you the number of times, and it was in some of those lighting setups I showed you before, where I've reached for that to see if all of what I learned about using the original was there in the new one, and it is plus more. It's dimmable and a few things. So that's one of my favorite. I always take that on the road. That, a couple of light panels, 1x1 light panels. And so that as a 3-light setup, I feel like I can do a lot. I also usually take one of those small Inkies or overhead, and I sometimes use that just as a hair light or a rim light or something like that. So those 3, possibly 4 lights are that's the, I'm going to go someplace. Those are all small. They're all LED. They don't require much power. That's what I'm going to start with.
Okay, I'm going to add a little bit to that.
Okay.
My favorite is this Nanlite 6C Pavo tube. You can get the modifiers, the egg crate along with it. You can make them any color you want. You've got the iPhone remote control. You can even mount them with 1/4-20 or a magnetic mount.
I didn't realize we're going over. So last one real quick.
James Babbitt, San Diego. For both still and video photography, you provide interesting backgrounds, flower arrangements, plants, artwork, and things done.
Sometimes, yes. In that CEO of the credit union shot, in fact, I think it's still up on my computer, this one here, Every single plant back there was specifically positioned for this shot. Nothing is by mistake in this. I wanted her in a negative space. The rest of the thing I'm working with, but yes, we cleared everything out of the frame and brought in only what we thought would add to the setting we wanted her to appear in. So I think everybody does that. It's critical. All right, thank you. We've gone over a little bit. Sorry about that. I hope you enjoyed this. It's time to send everybody to After Hours. Thank you for listening. After Hours will be starting up right after this. We'll be back tomorrow with things, and let's roll credits. Thanks for watching, everybody.
The credits came up so fast.
So want to do the deconstruction of the ILM? Yes, please.
Oh, thanks for updating the
Good show,
credits.
good show.